Yeah. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to this new seminar series on technology from an industry perspective. It's hosted by the ARC Training Center for Medical Implant Technologies. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place. And for me, that is the land of the Wurundjeri, and pay my respect to their elders, families, past, present, and emerging. My name is Peter Lee, a professor at the University of Melbourne. I'm also the director of the Australian Research Council, ARC, Training Center for Medical Implant Technologies. Now, the center's goal is to train PhD level researchers for the orthopedic and maxillofacial implant industry in Australia. Now, to do this, we have one of the largest partnership of industry, university, hospitals in Australia focusing on personalized medical implants. So I'm really excited that we are kicking off this new seminar series with Eric Bert from 3D Meditech. And 3D Meditech is one of the industry partners of our training center. A quick introduction to Eric. Eric is the Chief Operating Officer at the 3D Meditech, who has about 35 years of disruptive technology management experience. Now, Eric leads 3D Meditech in development of new solutions for personalized medical devices, and more recently on COVID-19 testing. He holds a Bachelor of Science, Mechanical Engineering from the University of Massachusetts, and is a veteran in 3D printing and additive manufacturing. We brought global industries experience in medical device design, manufacturing, and regulatory compliances. Eric is also one of the inventor of the 3D Meditech world-leading COVID-19 3D printed nasal and saliva swab device and solutions, which I'm sure he will talk about in his presentation. Now, he will be presenting on personalized medical device production using additive manufacturing from patient data to finished product. Now, please note that this talk will be recorded. There will be a Q&A session after the talk. However, you can post your question anytime on the Q&A box. So just post it there and then we will collate them towards the end of the talk for a Q&A session. Without much further ado, I'll pass the time to Eric.
Well, Peter, thank you for the introduction. It's really a pleasure to be invited to speak to this audience on making personalized medical devices using additive manufacturing. As Peter said, I have quite a lot of experience in the additive manufacturing environment, and especially in medical devices. And there are a lot of myths out there, I think. And so the focus of this talk is to try and show some real life examples of the idiosyncrasies and intricacies of using 3D printing in the making personalized medical devices. And really, the punchline here is that 3D printing is really only a part of the process. So maybe I'll start with a quick look at the 3D printing industry in general. As many of you probably know, 3D printing has been around for, I don't know, 30 years or more, and it really started with the advent of stereolithography. But really today, despite a lot of the news out there, volume 3D printing applications are pretty few. There are a handful of celebrated aircraft applications. You can see in the images there turbine blades. You know, the GE 9X engine is able to deliver twice the thrust at half the weight because it has 3D printed titanium aluminide turbine fan blades, or turbine blades, high temperature turbine blades in the back of the engine. And those are best made with 3D printing. It's the most effective way and the only way to make them. GE is also printing very intricate fuel nozzles where the internal channels of the fuel nozzle, and that's the device next to the turbine blades, the internal channels of the fuel nozzle, which allows the fuel to be passed by the coldest section of the fuel to have it enter the combustion chamber at the lowest possible temperature, and allows for the highest possible thrust. So those parts are made in the hundreds and thousands, and they're not patient matched medical devices for sure, but they are serially produced high volume examples of 3D printed applications. Then, of course, there's the medical and dental application space, and in the medical application space, in the implant space, 3D printing is also used. And again, a little bit of a myth to bust is that the vast majority of 3D printing that's going on in the implant production businesses around the world is for serially produced devices, so generic devices, off-the-shelf devices, if you will. And the reason for that is, you know, I think it's clear to most of us, and hopefully by the end of my talk, it'll be clear to all of us, why additive manufacturing is ideal for making patient match devices. But for making serially produced orthopedic devices, implants, acetabular cups, you know, stems, various, you know, knee femoral trays and other knee implant components. It's because the trabecular structures that maximize osseointegration are best produced with 3D printing techniques. It's too difficult to do them with machining techniques, and coating techniques are less effective. So that's why 3D printing is ideal. Metal 3D printing is ideal for many orthopedic implant devices. There are also some high volume applications of 3D printing in some random consumer products. I mean, the sneaker or trainer that's showed in the lower right-hand corner of this slide, those soles are 3D printed. They're not customized, and for sure there are a lot of customized orthotic activities going on in the shoe and foot space, but not the highest volume as there are in the sneaker production. You know, mascara brushes are made with high volume 3D printing, etc. And then, of course, 3D printing is really popular and common in personalized medical devices, both for the devices themselves, but also for cutting jigs and drill guides and certainly for medical models. And I guess what you can glean from this information is that today only very high value applications are able to be served by 3D printing, and it's 3D printing that's used to make generic features that can't be made with other traditional manufacturing methods. And then if 3D printing really, the mass or the lion's share of 3D printing that's going on in the world is going on for the purposes of prototyping, building tools, and then an activity that's called gap production. So in lots of different product development evolutionary paths, you know, the prototypes may or may not be made with 3D printing. And then while the hard tools are being produced, for example, injection molding tools, hundreds and thousands of parts can be made via 3D printing in order to get products to market more quickly. And this is all mainly done via service bureaus. So there are companies around the world that have large numbers of 3D printers. They're all ganged together, and it's those companies, those service bureaus, that provide 3D printing services to companies that don't have their own 3D printers. So that's kind of an overview of the 3D printing industry. I'll be interested to see in the Q&A whether that was the perception that folks on the line had. Moving to the next slide are just some examples of really high volume users. Stryker, an American orthopedic implant manufacturer, has over 100 3D printers, metal 3D printers, titanium 3D printers, making serial devices in their Ireland factory. And again, those are principally on the back of superior osseointegration patterns printed into the devices. And then, of course, Stryker and many other leading customized implant manufacturers use 3D printing to form those features. Align Technologies, the maker of Invisalign dental aligners, has over 200 big frame SLAs running in their factories in Mexico and China. And while you might not think of it off the cuff, dental aligners are the single largest user of 3D printing in the world, clear, far and away. And also, dental aligners are the single largest category of personalized medical devices. And in this case, unlike implants, titanium implants, hips and knees, and spinal devices, etc., here 3D printing is used not to make the device itself, but to make the sacrificial tooling that then is used to form the aligners. There's a thermo vacuum forming process that forms the specialist polymer over the 3D printed tool in order to make the dental aligner. And Align makes dental arches for this purpose at the rate of over 350,000 units a day. So that's a very leading user of 3D printing in personalized medical devices that quietly chunks along at very impressive rates. I mentioned General Electric earlier, and GE has hundreds of metal 3D printers running across its business units worldwide. GE, as you may or may not know, has a division called GE Additive, and I worked in that business for a while as they acquired a business called Arcam that I was working in. And GE is proactively driving new additive applications wherever possible because they really believe in the advantages of it. But really today, the majority of the 3D printed parts that the GE is making are mostly serial jet engine applications, some of which I described earlier. There are certainly all sorts of different satellite components and military aircraft components that are 3D printed, but those are, while impressive and technically very sophisticated, are relatively small volumes. And then there are many other small multiple machine installations of 3D printers, as I said, in OEMs who are big believers in 3D printing for their businesses, service bureaus, prototypes, tooling, gap production, etc. So those are some examples of really institutionalized 3D printing applications. And so, given that, you can look at the advantages or why you use additive manufacturing, and really, I think it's clear to most that the advantages are greater, or even almost unlimited geometric feature freedom. There's a couple of pictures I inserted there of that pretty wild-looking organic piece of artwork, actually. 3D printers, of course, there's a wide range of technologies, and some have more higher resolution and different materials and more capability than others, and the geometric freedom is not completely unlimited, but it is very broad. And of course, flexibility. Responsiveness. You can do things at soft tooling speed. You don't have to wait for hard tools to be built. Of course, prototyping, which can be done very quickly and needs to be done very quickly in product development processes, and then gap production, which I keep going back to. So I think it's a nice stark comparison, and I picked black and white images for both so you can see that kind of subtractive imaging or subtractive manufacturing process on the right, and then the 3D printed process on the left. The challenges, however, for 3D printing is that, and I'm the biggest 3D printing optimist any of you have ever met, but 3D printing comparatively to traditional manufacturing methodologies is slow and it's expensive. And the material sets that are available to 3D printers, as opposed to the material sets that products are made using traditional methods, is relatively limited. And the big problem with making end use parts, as they're called in the industry, is that the material characteristics of those materials which can be 3D printed are not so often well matched with the characteristics that are required of the products. An example there is that you can 3D print a mouth guard, for example, but the material that you would use to 3D print the mouth guard is not really what the mouthguard users are looking for. Good for prototypes. And then, of course, for a smaller subset of products, for gap production, there are 3D printed materials that whose material characteristics are sufficient to be used in the end products. 3D printing comparatively is new. 25 or 30 years old is a lot different than hundreds of years old. And the systems, the 3D printing systems themselves are they're of lower reliability as compared to traditional systems. And for very high reliability and highly regulated environments, 3D printed technologies lack the long validation history, so they're perceived at higher risk. The TGA for sure perceives 3D printed products as higher risk, and have put in place rules and testing to manage that. And the FDA or the FAA in the U.S. in terms of approving 3D printed parts that go to flight are also having to rely on track records that are not as long and hallowed as traditional ones are. So, and finally, and it goes to the driver behind the CMIT center that we're involved in, is that there's a relatively small pool of technology and industry expertise in 3D printing compared to traditional methodologies. But we're working hard to up that game by training more smart folks to help fuel the industry's growth. So, in summary, the 3D printing business's advantages and challenges nonetheless haven't stopped it from expanding very quickly, and it's very exciting. There are new materials, new technologies constantly evolving, and improved performance and lower costs. So all of these factors are enabling an increasing number of applications, products, to go with additive. So as 3D printing machines become faster and more reliable, and the materials become better and less expensive, then the value equation for more products to be manufactured, more end products to be manufactured via 3D printing will of course increase. Luckily and thankfully, the personalized medical devices, and certainly titanium and metallic personalized medical devices, are really well matched to the capabilities. The demands of the PMD space is well matched to the capabilities of and costing profile of 3D printing technologies today. So that's why there's just an explosion of growth into the use of 3D printing in personalized medical devices. And so that kind of brings us to 3D Meditech, and 3D Meditech was formed back in 2016 right here in Port Melbourne. And our mission was pretty simple. I've spent decades working with hundreds of customers, trying to find those applications for which 3D printing can be used to make production parts. And there's lots of prototyping going on, and lots of gap production going on, and lots of R&D going on, and medical models and surgical planning and those sorts of things. But our mission was not to make one-off bespoke devices. We didn't want to be a service bureau providing printing services, as I described, but we wanted to make OEM products, our own products. We wanted to own the intellectual property, and we wanted to do it at scale. So we wanted to leverage 3D scanning and 3D printing and the automated anatomical data handling technologies to go along with that, to build scale personalized medical devices. And I might say that there are lots of amazing medical devices being made in the world, bespoke devices that are one-offs, that are an engineering project all by themselves, and the technology that goes into those and the patient outcomes that come out of those are miraculous. But they're really a low volume activity, and our objective was to build automated scale, automatic mass customization, and the idea there was to deliver improved patient outcomes by building a large and growing medical device manufacturing industry in Melbourne. And there's no reason why that can't be the case. And here at 3D Meditech, we're we're down the road of delivering on that dream. So that's a bold, complicated, and challenging mission to kind of wake up to. But you know, we started anyway, and first thing we did was we zeroed in on markets, decided which products we wanted to develop, and then set out to develop go-to-market strategies. And once that's done, you know, we had to select materials and manufacturing technologies and production technologies, which 3D printing equipment to use, which materials to use, but then which other production methodologies that would go along with that. And again, back to the theme of my talk here today, is that 3D printing is only a component of the production process of a personalized medical device. You know, in the case of you know, knee implants, for example, although the device, the acetibular cup may be 3D printed, there's still complex machining and finishing and plating operations that go on after the 3D printing is done. So those all need to be tuned to the priorities of the device and its use case. We had to set off to hire specialist engineers and software developers. You know, the software tools, you know, we don't make 3D printers, we buy 3D printers. We don't make 3D printing materials, we buy those. But really, in order to set up a production line and a process all the way from treatment planning and you know, patient engagement with surgeons and healthcare providers, you can't just go to Amazon and buy those things. You have to develop them. So and the software to take, whether they're 3D surface scans or DICOM files from CT, and the software and algorithmic tools to take those anatomical inputs and actually turn them into programs for equipment, STL files that can be 3D printed, isn't something that you can buy. You need to do that yourself. And so we've done that, and I'll describe that in more detail in a little bit. Then, of course, managing clinical trials and process validation, and ISO 13485 registration, and regulatory approvals. You know, that's a science by itself. So it's been a number of years now, but we've been through all of those processes, and we're now at work. So it's been a very challenging yet satisfying journey, and we're just at the beginning of it. This next slide is a slide kind of pictorially covering our products. And if I could start in the middle where it says circle plagiocephaly helmets, that's the first product that we started with at 3D Meditech. And this is a device for babies with plagiocephaly, which is cranial deformities. And because the bones in the skull in a baby don't fuse until about 12 months old, if a helmet is applied to the head during the rapid growth and fusing of those bones, the shape of the skull can be quite easily modified. So the steps are simple, and it was really a proof of concept product, although we've made and make hundreds and hundreds of these. So the first thing is high precision off contact scanning, which is going on the left, and then those anatomical details are extracted and brought into an environment where we can convert them to digital data, and then work on measuring, and then the next, you know, defining measurements, and then defining a treatment plan. The next stage, of course, is the device design, which we've written algorithms to do automatically from the anatomical data. And then we 3D print them. You can see those as some helmets that are 3D printed with selective laser sintering there. And then on the right-hand side of the slide here in that row is, of course, the product, the medical device, the patient-specific medical device being fitted to the baby. Above it is our Smile Style Clear aligner product. I described earlier Invisalign making 350,000 aligners per day, and they do. We're much lower volume than that, you know, tens of thousands per month, but nonetheless, we've developed a process to do that. And from an engineering perspective, although the clinical outcomes and the clinical issues that we're seeking to address are much different. The technology from an engineering perspective is very similar. So on the left, we're acquiring data, and I'm going to speak more about the SmileStyle journey in a second. But we're acquiring digital anatomical data via intraoral scanner, and then we're doing a digital conversion process there, and then we move into a CAD tool where we move teeth and do the smile design or the device design, and you can see that on the right hand-ish side, there's a 3D printed arch that will have the specialist aligner polymer thermal vacuum formed onto it, and then at the right is the actual device which the patient is fitting into her mouth down there. And then, even more exciting from a technology perspective, and certainly a higher risk class device from the TGA perspective, is a similar supply chain or development chain there for a patient-specific lumbar spine implant. And again, CT scan on the left, and digital conversion in the next row, and then device design, and then the slide there with the sparkly image. I'm trying to show the spinal implant actually being selective laser sintered on a powder bed fusion metal 3D printer, and then on the right we have to use an X-ray to show the device actually implanted into the lumbar spine. So those are the current product ranges that we're working on here at 3D Meditech. The circle plagiocephaly helmets and the SmileStyle aligners are in volume production today. The patient-matched spinal implant is a development project that is part of our CMIT work with Peter and the University of Melbourne. And then we have a variety of other implant projects that are on our roadmap. So that's kind of our product evolution story. Peter mentioned that coincidentally we and I have been involved in quite a successful nasopharyngeal and saliva swab COVID testing process. So when COVID hit a year ago or so, we had 3D printing capacity and engineering know-how at our fingertips here at 3D Meditech in our facility in Port Melbourne. We're ISO 13485 registered, and so people from around the country started calling us saying, can you make ventilator parts? Can you make personal protection equipment? Can you make elements of hazmat suits for surgeons to protect them from COVID in theater? And we made all of those things, and we participated in the ventilator challenge, and made hundreds of what I think of as plumbing parts that go into the patient circuit of ventilators. So very, very exciting times for us. But we actually were very lucky to get involved with the University of Melbourne and with the Doherty Institute and the Royal Melbourne Hospital, and we developed a nasopharyngeal swab because getting nasopharyngeal swabs at the time, given what was going on in the rest of the world, was very difficult. So we developed a nasopharyngeal swab, which we took through clinical testing and on to TGA registration. And in fact, the Commonwealth bought nearly a million COVID test kits from us to go into the stockpile. So we went from a company that was making hundreds of helmets to thousands of aligners to millions of test swabs. So it was a very exciting process for us. And along the way, because of the relationships that we had developed with the university and with the Doherty and the hospital and health networks around the country, the advent of saliva swab testing came into play. So we put our thinking hats on again, and we invented and patented a saliva swab, and that's the device up top. We call it the honey dipper, and it basically capitalizes on the surface tension of saliva, because saliva is relatively viscous, and we're able to take the viscous saliva from the mouth and have it cling to those discs in the saliva swab there. So a very volumetrically appreciative sample, 400 microliters, can be extracted from the mouth easily and safely and go into a vial for testing. In fact, our saliva swab testing devices are being used in hotel quarantine across the country, and enabled the Australian Open to go off successfully. And there we've made and shipped almost 800,000 of those. So again, that's a pretty exciting success story. It's engineering and medical device know-how and the ability to navigate regulatory platforms, all combined into the ability to make lots and lots of medical devices. So you can see one of the engineers there standing in front of thousands of devices there. So it's really the confluence of preparedness meeting opportunity. But we had state-of-the-art technology. We were and are able to do rapid development, and we luckily were able to do some pretty breakneck execution to pull off a real sovereign manufacturing made in Australia success story. So that kind of makes it fun to come to work, I guess. Moving on to look at the SmileStyler journey in a little bit more detail, and have to make sure we stay on time here. As I said, clear aligners are the largest application of 3D printing globally. They're mass-produced patient-specific devices. They're made at quite high accuracy, as I've said there, and really we've had to introduce high levels of automation, which is key given we're not making in Mexico or China, but we're making right here in Port Melbourne. It's a clinical distribution product where the patient interacts with the dentist. There's a diagnosis and treatment planning activity, which is all web-based and semi-automated. Devices shipped to clinician, and the clinicians fit those to patients. And the patients change the aligners every 14 days, and returning to the clinic every 6 stages of the aligners to get a new scan, which allows us to do what we call phase treatment and stay on track. There are direct-to-consumer models where you get a mold kit, and you do it at home in your bathroom, you send it off, and the aligners come to your house. That's not the business that we're in, and that's okay for simple cases, but the lack of clinical participation and oversight means that the ability to attack even mildly complex cases and the success rates are appreciably lower in that space. So I want to look more closely then at the 5 steps of making a personalized medical device. And I've used SmileStyler because we're in production and it's easy for me to pull the examples. But really it's data acquisition, which I've described before, and then it's the digital conversion step. It's the treatment planning step. It's the manufacturing step. And I've kind of illustrated the manufacturing step here with a picture of one of our 5-axis robot cells that's trimming the aligner. And then, of course, it's patient application. So there again, the same image of the patient putting the aligner in her mouth. On the acquire anatomical data set, for the purposes of dental aligners, we're using an intraoral scanner, and there's an image of the intraoral scanner there. This is surface profiling. It's white light profiling, photogrammetry with about a 25 micron resolution. So you can see the image, the photos that come on the screen there while you're doing the scan, and then some heat mapping in the lower right-hand turn that where the colors show some different positional accuracy. There are laser profilometry measurement type scanners as well, but when the data we get is just an STL file, it's not a segmented file that differentiates between gums and teeth in this example. And then we also collect an OPG or an X-ray for reference. There are software techniques to extract the OPG and feed it into the treatment planning process as well, which we can use, but we don't use because it's not required in every case. I talked about DICOM files and implants and patient-specific implants. Same idea. There are software tools to extract from CT the data that's interesting and needed in order to produce the device using 3D printing in a similar way. And then the data needs to be handled to take it from just a scan and turn it into a segmented file that the device designer or the device design routines can start to use. So here in the case of dental aligners, the teeth and gums are segmented, the teeth are numbered, standard library shapes are automatically applied. you know, 3D printing is about STL files and surfaces and making surfaces and then filling them in with solids under the surface. So, you know, repairing surfaces are important, and there are routines to do that. It's called making the STL watertight. And then files are converted into a CAD format, and that's what's going on down below in the pictures of the teeth there, so that the files can, so that the CAD, the actual movements and the creation can happen. There's the treatment planning activity, which are the movements, and you can see in these images, you know, there's the XYZ movement spectrum around the Bluetooth in the upper image is something that will be familiar to a CAD user. So, you know, we're using dental CAD, if you will, and there are specialist CAD products. We've developed this one ourselves, but there are specialist CAD tools that are customized for, you know, lots of different medical device and applications and otherwise. So in the case of dental aligners, the tooth movements are planned, and of course there's you know, oversight from orthodontists and qualified dental technicians and protocols for the tooth movements, etc. And there are many automated elements in the software process, but there are also manual elements and protocols that are applied there. So the outputs then of that CAD tool or that CAD design process are, you know, the number of stages, the number of aligners that are needed to achieve the movements that are prescribed. You know, the STL files for each arch form tool, as I described earlier, are created. The treatment instructions and then the treatment timeline come out of that process. And that's then followed by then the manufacturing step. So the first step in every manufacturing process, especially digital manufacturing process, is the setup. And here, because we're handling, you know, thousands of STL files and case files per day, all of the CAD to manufacturing setup process is completely automated. There are too many files and too many things going on for it even to be touched manually. So this is the difference that I described earlier between making a one-off bespoke device and mass producing customized medical devices. So all the setup is automated, and we've written the algorithms to do that. So the case files, the STL files are created as an output to the CAD environment from the finished treatment plan, and then from that we use a variety of in-house developed routines and you know, various mesh manipulation routines to create the tools and the machine programs that you know, that are required for the high volume process. They're complex SQL database structures where all of these files and various other inputs are positioned so they're ready when called for by the various manufacturing processes and tools that are in the production room. You know, whereas paperless production control processes and machine program generation, and just to close it off, I like to say that even the shipping labels are automatically created as soon as the process is released to production. Then, you know, the second part of manufacturing process is actually the fabrication, right? So here's where the 3D printing comes in. So until now, there's been no 3D printing going on. There's certainly been lots of STL file handling and lots of 3D scanning, but there's been no 3D printing going on yet. And it's here where we 3D print, and you can see there's a 3D printer there. That's a DLP 3D printer that's used to print those arches. And then there's a picture of a thermal vacuum formed arch sitting there with the aligner over it, and again the same robot image where we're depanelizing and cutting the gingiva line. There's some really fun engineering in that 6-axis robot that actually rotates 390 degrees. And in that cell, there's a laser marking. Each part is laser marked individually, and then there's a cleaning and packing activity, and the parts go into the package, which is shipped to the dentist, and then they're fit to the patient. So, and of course, the end product are the aligners. They're patient matched under the new TGA rules, and if any of the attendees here have questions about patient matched devices and the TGA rules, I'd be happy to try to address those. But I'm sure some of the TGA folks that we deal with routinely at CMIT are on the line, or at least I hope they are, and maybe they can help us answer those questions as well. So all of the scan to print model, and that's really what we're trying to do here, scan to print in a volume way. It's largely automated. These processes are validated. So again, they're not one-off bespoke process. That although every aligner is different because they're injected automatically with patient-specific data, they're all made in processes that are validated, not manually created. That's a very important distinction. And we've done so leveraging 3D scanning and 3D printing technologies, which, as you might remember, was the objective that we set out to do in the beginning. So again, clear aligners is just one product example, but it's one that I've elected to go through today, just to kind of illustrate the crux of it's more than 3D printing. So one of the key things that Peter had asked me to address here, Peter and Jai and the others in CMIT, was that kind of the lessons learned, things that maybe students and PhD candidates on the line or listening in today have not found in their study in journals and in the classroom, things that are actually going on in the production environment, which is sometimes difficult to get university folks exposed to. So the byline here is that printing an STL file on a 3D printer is only a small part of making PMDs. Of course, understanding the regulatory environment is just essential here, and we tried to be on the front foot there. Validation of the software tools and manufacturing process is an essential guiding principle. We're making medical devices here, and we have regulatory obligations and requirements. So the software tools are very complex, but they can't be put into action in making devices that are given to, used by, or implanted in patients without that validation. The automated scan to print model has many applications in the growing PMD market, and that's what I always try to stress, that from an engineering perspective, and I don't want to belittle how complicated knee devices are, but from an engineering perspective, extracting patient data and doing the personalization is similar from 10,000 feet. Making PMDs and the supporting technology is a relatively new toolkit, so we need all the help and trained professionals we can get. And CMIT, of course, is a great step forward to growing the pool of qualified technologists to help us in industry get that job done. So Peter, I'm going to say that I'm on time and open for questions and discussion.
Thanks, Eric. Yes, we do have questions coming in. Maybe just a quick one from me, right? I think you talk a lot about the process for 3D printing, and then you touched a little bit about the process of manufacturing the 3D printed product. But can you comment, like, how consistent are these products? Like, if you make thousands of them, there's some nuances about 3D printing, making sure that that there's no voids inside your 3D printed components and things like that. So are these technology very reliable now that you can just trust them? You don't have to take this and
it's a great question. So like any other industry and equipment set, let's take the CNC machining business. You can buy inexpensive CNC machine tools that are neither accurate nor reliable, and you can buy sophisticated CNC machining centers that are both very accurate and very reliable. So the same is true of 3D printing. You can't expect to take a desktop 3D printer that costs $1,000 and repeatedly make something. But there are families and categories and manufacturers of 3D printing equipment that are both reliable and accurate. But you as a manufacturer, we as a manufacturer, we need to test, validate it, and monitor that. So the answer, I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, we have data to prove that our processes are reliable. but not all 3D printers are the same, and all processes need to be managed in a closed loop, airtight way.
All right. I'll dive straight into the audience questions. So the first one we had is for the Smile Styler. What part of the workflow is the hardest to develop code to automate?
Yeah, no, the hardest part of the work was to be able to automatically take a non-segmented STL file that comes out of the intraoral scanner and or comes out of the treatment planning process actually, and write the software to develop the robotic trim path, because that has to be very accurate, and the diversity of anatomies of all of us Homo sapiens walking the earth is really pretty big. One of the guiding tenets of the TGA's new personalized medical devices, is this thing called a design envelope. So we had to set a design envelope and write the software tools that were able to find those features and automatically create those those machine programs to get that done. So I would say it's a software algorithmic challenge was the hardest part. There are a lot of hard parts, but that was the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. In fact, that leads to the next question, which is an interesting one. Alfredo is asked, do the software used for the PMD need to be approved as a software as medical device?
No. So software. So listen, there are guidelines for sure. There are rules around software as a medical device. There are guidelines for software used in medical devices, but in order for it to be a medical device, the software has to be a key part of the diagnosis. The software has to be relied upon to make the diagnosis. But that's not to say that there aren't software validation requirements that are required as part of ISO 13485 to get a conformity assessment. So all of the software tools they call manufacturing aids, all of the software tools that we use in our process are all validated as part of our ISO 13485 registration and our quality management system. Alfredo's right that there's a little bit of a gray area, and maybe the folks at the TGA would answer the question a little differently, but everything needs to be validated, but every software algorithm, routine, and program is not a medical device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The next question, in the process of making the dental aligners, where is the human input required after the oral scan is completed? What do you think?
In the treatment planning process. So once the oral scan is completed, the oral scan is uploaded by the dentist or somebody in the dental surgery into a web portal, and then from the web portal we bring it into our process where the teeth are segmented, and then it goes to the treatment planning activity. And the treatment planning activity is it's tough to put your finger on it, but it's maybe half automated. There's some automated setup steps, but a trained dental technician with the oversight of an orthodontist need to interpret the prescription and make some of the movements that are incorporated into the treatment plan manually. We have in our technology roadmap processes to automate those steps as much as possible. So there's still today some manual interaction, but it's controlled by training and by protocols and by quality control gates through the process. And then thereafter in the production process, there are some aligners. There's some material handling that's done manually today, so it's not a black box with the lights out. And there are some process steps that require some manual interaction on some percentage of the devices, but they're in production. It's largely automated.
Yeah, a sort of a related question to to the human input component. There's a question around the benefits of 3D printing in the case of the clear aligner compared to the traditional process of molding, right? Do you want to comment on for example, do you think why is it so difficult to do molding that 3D printing has to come in? What are the real benefits there?
Cost and speed. Cost, speed, and accuracy. When the dental business has been around for 500 years or something, and still today, some dentists are using the same techniques that were used 500 years ago, I think. But the idea of plaster molds to make dental appliances is kind of yesterday's technology. It's still used in some volume, but there's this funny loop where plaster casts are taken in the surgery, and then those plaster casts are put into specialist dental scanners, so you can get a digital file from the plaster cast, and then you go do all the digital manipulations that I just talked about. But the trouble is, when you take the plaster cast, you introduce another pretty big set of tolerance excursions that it kind of removes from the efficacy. So if you can get nice, accurate digital data from the outset, then you can make a more accurate device, and then you can move the teeth more accurately. When dental aligners first started, instead making them on the plaster cast, can you imagine making plaster casts and kind of stacking them all up in a room and trying to thermovacuum form on them and make aligners? I mean, that would be, you could do a few of them, but you couldn't do more than a few of them very effectively. Certainly not in Australia. And machining was done first, very precise. The arches were that you take the digital image that you got from the plaster cast, and then you use machining to make the mold, and then you'd mold the aligner. And then, of course, 3D printing was a lot faster and cheaper and more accurate. So it's accuracy, speed, and cost. That's why you 3D print.
So do you have difficulties convincing people who use traditional plaster cast take up? I suppose because plaster cast or casting is a skill itself, right?
Yeah, dental technicians have to do the plaster casting too. No, a percentage of aligners and other dental appliances are still, the origin of the data still originates on a plaster cast, but the digital the direct digital anatomical data acquisition process, the scanner process, is becoming much more popular. And really, it's key for us because everything's done web-based and digitally, and there's a lot of automation. So working with plaster casts is just it's sort of night and day.
Alfredo again asks, how many aligners are needed per each individual?
Yeah, so the average case that we handle is about 24 stages. A stage is one lower and one upper aligner, and patients move or remove and change their aligners every 10 to 14 days. There are treatment plans. If you use a vibratory acceleration device, which helps the teeth move more quickly, then you can do a week. But so if you take 10 to 14 days, if you take 2 weeks and you have 24 of them, it's a year on average.
There's a general question by Nina Matthews. So she's thanking you. I'll just read up. Thanks for the interesting talk. For us just entering the field, are there specific software packages or tools you would recommend to master? Not necessary for medical applications, but in general.
In general, if you want to be in the personalized medical device business, or just in general?
I think in general, maybe 3D printing, CAD design.
Yeah. So you need to be able to deal with 3D solid CAD. You need to know how to run SolidWorks for sure. Being familiar with the Materialize suite of products is very important because it's, there are more than a few different software packages for managing STL files and the conversion from CAD into the 3D printing environment. But Materialise is a leader. They have a very nice tool called Magix, which is the industry leading tool for handling STL files and repairing, making them watertight and modifying them. Then of course, in the whole medical device design space, Materialise has all the tools around, starting with a DICOM file and extracting. The DICOM file is the file that can be taken from a CT output, for example, and isolating the different orthopedic elements, for example, of the knee, so that you can extract the data that you want to use in order to start designing a drill or cutting guide or even a device surface matching as well. So those are the two.
All right, thanks. There's a question around the nasal swab. So the question goes like this: did the shape of the nasal swab not allow for manufacture by other process, such as injection molding?
Great question.
And the follow comment was, given that approximately 1 million parts were manufactured, so why were they 3D printed?
Yeah. So the nasal swab has 100 micron diameter nodes on them, and so it's quite high resolution, and really not injection moldable, because that injection molding is the natural process. So we showed the nasal device. Well, maybe I could back up. One of the beauties of 3D printing is that first of all, you can do design evolutions very quickly. And during COVID, we were able to take and narrow. We came up, I think, originally with 12 different design concepts, and we printed them all. And in a matter of days, we were doing PCR tests with them and seeing what the capture rates were. And we were able to very quickly, get feedback from the field on which geometries worked more effectively in collecting samples. And we iterated toward the design that we went to production with, and we were able to do that very quickly. So 3D printing it's just magic in the ability to get prototypes and test them and get the feedback and make design changes and just do it repeatedly. And the design we came up with, although we started off with designs that we thought could be injection molded, but by the time we got to the design that was most effective, it was not practical to injection mold it, so we 3D printed it. It's okay. We have big frame EOS selective laser sintering machines, and we can make 6,000 parts in each machine each day. So it's quite high volume in that regard. On the saliva swab, you're right. You're right. We have moved on the saliva swab to injection molding because its mechanical features are injection moldable, and the injection molding process cost is a tenth the cost of 3D printing. So 3D printing is good for prototypes, it's good for design evolution, it's good for some gap production, as I said. And in the case of the nasal swabs, our nasal swabs are more expensive than the ones made via the flocking process in China. So the advantage is that A, we could make them quickly, and B, we can make them in Australia, independent of what's going on around the world. So it's a sovereign manufacturing story. But in a long term, the nasal swab is not a viable competitive product against all of the other low-cost products. But it is one that we can make. Saliva swab is a different story. It's a novel design that with injection molding, we compete on a global basis, and it's also a very effective thing. So we're quite pleased with that.
All right, thanks, Eric. We have hit the 1 p.m. mark. I'm sorry for some of the questions that's come in that we sort of run out of time to answer them. But please feel free to either send me an email or even Eric directly, and we'll certainly be happy to address them. Right. Thank you very much for all of you for attending the seminar, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next lecture. All right. Thank you very much.